Okay, well, welcome everybody. My name's Nicole Pratt. I'm from the University of South Australia and leading this project for the APAC community, all about multiple sclerosis. And we've called this study Treatment, Utilisation and Safety of Medicines for Multiple Sclerosis, otherwise known as the Telemus study, taking our name from our Odyssey book. So, multiple sclerosis, what is it? It's an immune-mediated disease of the central nervous system, and it results in cumulative disability, which can include limb weakness and visual impairment and so on, incontinence and cognitive dysfunction. It occurs in about 2.8 million people worldwide, and who are estimated to be living with the disease. And the age at diagnosis is commonly between 20 and 40 years, so it is a disease of the younger population. It affects 3 times more women than it does men, and the majority of the people who live with the disease have periods, which have they're free of disease, but other periods where they have relapses, and these relapses often lead to residual deficits, and they accumulate over the disease course. So the treatment for multiple sclerosis is really disease-modifying treatments, and what they do is they try to induce remission and therefore delay the progression of the disease. So treatments are really important in this disease to mitigate some of those outcomes. So the study that we are planning to run across the Asia-Pacific region has 2 facets. The first one is to determine the prevalence of multiple sclerosis across the APAC region. And the reason why that's particularly important is because the estimates of multiple sclerosis in terms of prevalence are quite varied across the world. And it's unclear whether that's because of a different incidence of disease or whether it's due to estimates that are unstable. So one of the ideas that we have is to really try to determine what is the prevalence across our region. So this particular study that I've got on the screen here really says that MS is one of those neglected diseases across the Asia-Pacific region, and really imploring for more evidence in this area so that we can understand some of the risks and benefits of the disease and the treatments. So one of the ways that we are going to do this study is to look at a phenotype for multiple sclerosis and really try to understand the disease and how we might measure it across the databases we have access to across the region. And lucky for us, in the Phenotype Phebruary work that was done earlier this year on day 18, multiple sclerosis was the topic of the conversation. And as part of that discussion, what became really clear is that the identification of MS is really quite uncertain because there's no specific test for the disease. Doctors have to do sort of a rule out type of approach, and they have to use medical histories and physical exams to identify the condition, and maybe MRIs and so on, but there's no specific definitive test for the disease. Additionally, MS is a disease that sort of comes and goes. It has tendencies to remit and flare, and therefore it's really important to understand what part of the disease that we are trying to measure. So is it new onset disease, or is it the relapsing MS, or some other form of MS? So in the Phenotype Phebruary discussion, a couple of different algorithms for identifying MS were explored, and in this case, they were just looking at any stage of the disease, but we may want to modify some of those phenotypes to look at different stages of the disease. So I won't go into too much detail, but there was a lot of work done on different types of ways of identifying MS, either just a single occurrence early on in the disease, or looking at different combinations of occurrences. So, more than one hospitalisation or occurrence, in a period of time, or a combination of inpatient and outpatient here in the Culpeper algorithm, or looking at specific disease-modifying therapies. And in MS, there are very specific drugs that can be used in the disease, so it is possible to identify MS using sort of medication use. And what you can see is there's a very different number of patients that are identified using these different algorithms. The sensitivity and specificity of each of those algorithms was also looked at, and you can see that the results vary widely. We've got some algorithms that had a higher specificity, but others with a low sensitivity. So we really have to think about the way that we look at MS, and that's going to be part of their study of our APAC. So the second aim of the study that we're going to be doing is looking at the actual utilisation of medicines for multiple sclerosis across the APAC region. Here are some of the medicines that we've identified so far that are used in MS. We've got early aggressive treatments and traditional or the older medicines, and some escalation therapies, some new therapies, mod and so on. And quite obviously, there's going to be some differences across the world and perhaps across the APAC region as well in terms of what medicines are approved. So again, this is another sort of area that we'll be exploring with this cross-national study. Now, the reason those sort of categories of medicines are important is because there's been a very dynamic market in multiple sclerosis medicines across the APAC region. And this is a study we did here in Australia, where we've seen a really high use of the early aggressive treatments in Australia, and much less of the earlier treatment. However, a study that was done just recently in the US shows a very different pattern of use. So there's much higher use of the older traditional therapies than the early aggressive. And this kind of pattern variation is going to be really important for us to understand when we're looking at the safety and effectiveness of these treatments. And perhaps we can use that variability to really start to understand whether treatments with the early aggressive pathways do infer a better effectiveness of these medicines. So the third aim, what we hope to get to, is actually a study of the real-world safety and effectiveness, and looking at the differences between the different treatment approaches and how that impacts on patient effectiveness. Lucky for us, there are a couple of ongoing RCTs happening at the moment, two in particular that are looking at the differences between the early effective treatments and the traditional therapy. So we really have some evidence that we'll be able to benchmark our results against. However, these studies won't be complete for quite some time yet. So hopefully we come to some conclusions well before those studies reach theirs. So that's all I want to say. This last thing is that the study is still ongoing, and everyone is welcome to join. We're going to finalise our phenotype and our medicine lists in the next couple of meetings. The protocol is in development, and if you want to join, we are study 3 of the APAC community, multiple sclerosis, and we meet on a Wednesday at 11 AM every fortnight. So thank you, and I hope you can come along the journey with us around multiple sclerosis. Thanks.